Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second Global Virtual Academic Meeting. Today, we will be talking to one of the pioneers in academia, Dr. Jacqueline Laws. Dr. Jacqueline had a varied career in both academia and industry. She originally graduated in psychology and undertook a PhD in psycholinguistics at the University of London. After 5 years as a postdoctoral fellow, she worked in industry as a cognitive ergonomist involved in the design of computer products. She also spent 5 years in Italy, where she taught English and worked as an interpreter and translator. She returned to academia in 2005 as a lecturer in linguistics at the University of Reading in the Department of English Language and Applied Linguistics, where she has her teaching grammar at all undergraduate and master's levels, as well as research methods to PhD students. She has supervised a number of PhD students, and she was the director of the PhD programs for 8 years. In 2012, Dr. Jacqueline won a university award for outstanding contributions to teaching and learning. She is now an honorary fellow in linguistics in the University of Reading. Dr. Jacqueline's research interests relate to all aspects of grammar, from constructional perspectives, motion event control, child language acquisition, cognitive linguistics, and corpus linguistics in relation to English, Mandarin, and Italian. Her current research focuses on the distribution properties of complex words in adult spoken language as a function of register. Today, she has kindly agreed to join us, and she proposed to talk about two main topics. First, some tips about the PhD journey, avoid the tunnel. Second, data collection online, the hurdles and the rewards. And now, without further ado, here's our special guest speaker, Dr. Jacqueline. Dr. Jacqueline, the screen is all yours, and I'll mute myself to avoid any possible distractions.
Thank you, Rana. Thank you very much for that introduction, Rana, and thank you for inviting me here today. It's a real pleasure to be able to speak to you. Okay, so yes, some tips about the PhD journey, avoid the tunnel. That's the first thing I want to talk to you about. And then secondly, about collecting data online, which is something that we're going to be having to do much more frequently these days with the pandemic. Okay, some tips about the PhD journey. Now, I really wanted to talk to you about a few issues today, because these are tips which I wish I had known when I was a PhD student all those years ago. And they're also based on the experiences of some of my own PhD students that I supervised more recently. Okay, so the first point I want to make is, and this may come as a bit of a surprise, but the message is, don't be afraid to tell your supervisor that you're in difficulty. Now, this is really quite interesting, because in the days when I was a PhD student, you didn't really see your supervisor very often, and you actually had to sort of get on with things. Nowadays, things have changed quite a lot, and there's a much better relationship with supervisors, but nevertheless, what happens to us all is that when you are doing your research, sometimes it just doesn't go to plan. And you start blaming yourself, and you feel reluctant and afraid of letting your supervisor know, and you end up feeling like this. You feel that you're going to be revealing your weaknesses to your supervisor if you tell them that you're having difficulty, that you're stuck, or maybe there's something that they've said that they want you to do or to think about, and you're not really sure about it. This happens all the time. And you go away and you try and work it out yourself, and you get more and more and more upset about it. So really, the point here is, try to avoid this if you possibly can. Not sharing with your supervisor your worries is the worst thing that you can do, because you just get more and more low about it, more and more worried about it. And the sooner you can discuss it with your supervisor, the better, because it can go on for a long time, and then it could be a problem. So Your supervisor can help. That's what your supervisor is there. So, don't be afraid of doing that. They'll really appreciate that you have come to them with problems, rather than you're having a supervision where you say to them, yes, everything's fine. Yes, everything's fine. They want to know about the problems that you're having too. So do make sure that you share those problems with them. So in other words, don't hide in your tunnel, and trust that relationship with your supervisor and talk to them about your worries and concerns about the direction things are going in, or decisions that you have to make about your research. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point I want to make is try to write up as much of your work as you can. Now, after the first year of the PhD, there are fewer opportunities to produce written material that you present to your supervisor. So really after that first year, because I'm going to be talking about the whole journey, not at any particular time, but things that I think are important about the whole PhD journey. So take every chance that you can to write up and amend, develop old versions of your literature review or your methodology as much as you possibly can. And of course, I mean, I say this, but if you can publish your work during the time of your PhD registration, it is so valuable. You probably can't really think about this until you get to the end of your second year, when you've collected most of your data and you've got a much better idea of what you're doing. But if you can possibly find that time to write up your study or your studies in various ways, it will really, really help you as a student and help you obviously in your career later on. So again, don't hide in that tunnel. Get out there, move with your writing and get the writing out and make it available to people as much as you can. Okay, so the third point is, if you can, try to present at conferences whenever possible. So as I'm sure you're aware, certainly in the UK, there are regular annual conferences for PhD students, and these will be happening all over the world as well, particularly in the UK. There are very, very regular ones for linguistics. So the importance of doing this is that when the exercise of condensing your work into a 15 or 20-minute presentation is so useful. It helps so much to crystallize your ideas, your thoughts, and it actually forces you to say what it is that you're actually doing. And so again, rather than hiding in your tunnel, which we all create for ourselves, this tunnel, we all create this tunnel for ourselves, then it allows you, preparing for conferences means that you can report what you're doing and discuss it with other people in an open way. You might think, oh, well, I've got nothing to say. I'm not ready yet. I haven't finished collecting my data. I haven't finished analyzing my results. It doesn't matter. Whatever stage you're at, you can always talk for 10 or 15 minutes about what you're doing, whether it's from a theoretical point of view, whether it's from a methodological point of view, or even further on, if you've actually got your results analyzed as well. And this exercise is so important because it really forces you to say clearly what you're doing and why you're doing it and where it fits in with everything else in the discipline. It is such an important thing to do. And it's really rewarding. You just feel fantastic afterwards and you get good questions and it really motivates you to move on. So You may have a mechanism whereby you can report regularly at conferences, but if you can find other PhD conferences around the country, do try and attend them. And of course, they're likely to be virtual at the moment, like this experience, but do take advantage of those. So again, this is another way of getting out of your tunnel. Okay, so the next one is about writing. When you're writing your thesis, when you're writing any part of it, what you must remember is that you're not writing for yourself, you're writing for your audience. And this is something that takes a little bit of getting used to. It's not something that comes naturally or automatically. So whatever piece of work it is, if it's a chapter or a section of a chapter, remember that you're writing this for others to read, not for yourself. It's not intended for you. It's always intended. Anything you write is intended for someone else. You know this already. You know what the content is already. So try to imagine who your readers are. In the thesis, of course, they're going to be your examiners. So if you can think about writing for them specifically, and your examiners will probably be identified halfway through your PhD journey. So you'll know who those people are by looking at their profiles online. You'll know what their areas of expertise are. So imagine that you're talking to them and not writing for yourself. Talk directly to that person. You want to please them. You're not trying to please yourself. And I think this is one of the greatest mistakes that PhD students make when they're writing up, because they think that they just have to write everything up methodically and laboriously. But try and imagine that you are actually telling this to somebody else. You're not telling it to yourself. And that will actually make it more interesting to read. And try and bring in questions every now and again to sort of break the flow of the prose. As I say, try and make it pleasing to the reader as much as you can. So I hope you've found that thought-provoking, because I think this is also a skill. It doesn't actually come naturally. But again, it's getting out of your tunnel. It's getting out of thinking about you and what you're doing. It's thinking about how other people are going to receive what you're writing. Okay, so another point, time management. We all know how important time management is, and I'm sure you've been given a lot of advice about how to do this over the time. But it's really important to keep updating your plan, to keep making sure that you've got everything scheduled carefully. Once you've started a particular process, for example, in analyzing the results, then you can use this information to plan better how long it's going to take you over time. Now, the other thing is, and you will have heard this again and again, but it's really important to have a break every now and again. And by a break, I don't mean 5 minutes, 10 minutes to have a drink or something, but I mean perhaps going for a walk for about an hour, for a decent amount of time, so that you can mull things over in your head, you can think about things, and then you'll find you come back really refreshed. You've had a new idea. You've suddenly seen something from a slightly different perspective. We always feel that we're fighting against time and we just sit at the computer and we keep working away. But it is important to take a break, as I say, for about an hour for you, just to go for a walk, get some fresh air and think about what you're doing and think about it from a different perspective. It really does help enormously. Even if you do it once a week, that is fantastic. So again, get out of your tunnel as much as you can and refresh your ideas. Okay, so then the next point I want to say about this tunnel is try and look at the big picture. As you can see, this has been the message behind a lot of things that I've been saying. In our research, we're always focused on a very niche area, and we tend to lose sight of the big picture. In the first year, you're encouraged to think about the context of your research and where it fits in relation to other disciplines. But the need to do this tends to disappear the further on you get and once you start collecting your data. So it's really important to step back and ask yourself every now and again bigger, more general questions about your research and why it's important. Preparing for conferences is a really good way of doing this. It helps you step out of yourself and stand back. And also because it forces you to prepare a presentation where you're inviting people into your research in an accessible way. And again, that makes you think about the bigger picture and what it is you're trying to do. So again, this is trying to get out of your tunnel, look at the bigger picture. So as far as this part of the presentation is concerned, as you can see, avoid that tunnel. When we're immersed in our research, we lose sight of that bigger picture and the fact that actually we are contributing to a larger landscape of scholarship. And it's easy to get trapped in that tunnel, so try to avoid it. And of course, by that tunnel, I mean our head. We get trapped inside our heads. Okay, so I'm now going to move on to something more methodological, collecting data online. And clearly, because of the pandemic, this is something we're going to have to do more and more. And this year, I had my first real experience of doing this. And there were a number of things that I identified that I had no idea beforehand was going to be the case. So I'd like to share some of these observations with you. Okay, so really the hurdles I'm going to be talking about first of all. It takes a lot of preparation to organize these online sessions. I held a session this summer. I needed 24 participants altogether for this group. Normally, I could have asked students at Reading to come at a particular time, and I could have executed this experiment in one session with them all together, face to face. But of course, I couldn't do that. And what it meant was that I ended up with 7 different groups to collect my data from 24 participants. So there were between 2 and 5 participants in each of these smaller sessions that I conducted over Zoom. So clearly it's very, very time consuming. And the preparation for it, contacting people, emailing people, is very, very time consuming. So you have to be really very organized as well and have a good schedule and a list of everything you have to do and tick everything off. I found that with so many sessions running in a week, I got very confused about what was happening when. So you really have to be extremely organized. Okay, so I found that it was useful to send out reminders, email reminders, about the event the day before and send the Zoom link about 30 minutes before the start of the session. And I also advised them to join the meeting at least 10 minutes beforehand so that any technical issues could be sorted out. Some people left it till the very, very last minute, and that could hold everybody else up. So they need time to organize themselves and settle down before you start the session. I found that Zoom was a great platform for this, and of course it's used in conferences, so it's ideal for this sort of thing. Now, one thing I hadn't anticipated, which took me by surprise, was my advice is tell your participants in advance that they must have both the audio and the video on during the session. Now, I made this mistake. I made I had a bad experience, and it was the very, very last group of participants, the last group. And one person in this group came on only with the audio to start with and said that they hadn't set up their preferences for the video. So we couldn't use the video. Well, I said, okay, fine, let's go ahead, thinking that, well, maybe it won't make any difference. But actually it did. It made a big difference. And first of all, I wasn't really sure what this person was doing because I couldn't see them. But what happened was, at the end of the session, I realized they had done the task completely wrong. And so they actually had to do the task all over again once everybody else had signed off. So fortunately, it was the very last group for me, but it's something that, you know, I would now want everybody to know. Always ensure and ask them in advance when you invite them that they have got both audio and visual communication available for that session. Okay, another thing that I found was if you want them to download documents, and I was actually sending some illustrations over email, and sometimes it took quite a while for them to download. Make sure that you accommodate that by giving enough time for them to download documents to look at. Also, if you have now, for example, if you're doing a pre-test and a post-test situation, you might make documents available that you don't want them to look at in between. One of the hazards, one of the problems with doing this online data collection is even if you tell them to delete something, they may be tempted to look at the material in between. That's just something that we have to live with. But overall, remember that it just takes longer to do everything, and always run a pilot to make sure that it's going okay. So ask a friend to do a trial session with you just to make sure that everything works to plan. But, you know, despite that, there are the rewards, and you can achieve most of what you want to achieve in a face-to-face situation. And you're doing it from the comfort of your home. So there are all sorts of advantages. Okay, well, with that completes all the points I wanted to make. And thank you for your attention. I'd be very pleased to answer any questions.
Thanks a lot, Jackie. Thanks a lot. What a fabulous talk. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Oh, thank you.
Is any of the panelists wants to say something before we start with the questions?
I think I would like to welcome Professor Mark Casson if he have a question, if you have a point to add. Let me fix the Professor Mark Casson.
Okay, I apologize for arriving late, but I was plagued by some technical issues. I'm not using my usual computer, but I caught up with about 2/3 of the presentation. Listening to the last bit, it did strike me that the impact of COVID on research experience and on the ability to carry out research is becoming really quite an issue, and it's not something I think universities are getting to grips with. One is that basically everybody that the research student is dealing with is becoming that much busier. The supervisor may be too busy to speak to you or to concentrate on giving you feedback. If you are carrying out interviews, people may be too busy to actually participate in an interview. And I do think that it's important in situations like this to be flexible enough to think of ways of possibly varying the specification of your project a bit in order to avoid some of the bottlenecks. So I think COVID is very challenging, and it may be beneficial to students to actually think whether they can adapt around it rather than just resolutely plow on with what they've already committed to.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. I think that's right. And thinking back at my own experience this summer when I had to run the Zoom sessions, it is possible that I could have conducted that particular group without Zoom. I could have done it completely remotely, perhaps by email. The reason I did it on Zoom was actually because it was a third group from two previous groups that I had conducted face-to-face. So in order to keep the conditions the same, I had to do it face-to-face. But I think you're absolutely right. We have to be a bit more inventive about how we collect data and think of alternative ways of doing it. Yeah, it's a big problem.
Thank you, Professor Mark, for the question, and thank you for attending the session, and thank you, Dr. Jacqueline. Dr. Rana, would you read the question?
Sure. Okay, let's start with the first one. How to stay motivated for the duration of the program? Any thoughts, Jacqueline?
To stay motivated?
Yeah.
Well, I think some of the things, you know, I think giving conference papers is one of the most exhilarating things you can do. You get so much positive feedback from that. And, you know, as I was saying, the very fact that you have to condense everything into a 10 or 15 minute presentation is very, very stimulating. I know that you can't do that all the time, and you can only maybe do it once or probably twice a year. But I think that's one thing that you can do to keep you stimulated. I think, I mean, generally talking about what you're doing is always a good thing to do. So finding opportunities, again, as I said, to write your work up, because you find that you start changing the way that you're thinking. You know, it's very easy to start going round and round in circles. But if you start writing it down, and you find that you have to look at it differently because you're actually expressing it in words. And that can be very motivating too, very stimulating. I think those are probably two of and having these breaks. I find, you know, I often find going for a walk for an hour is just, I'm amazed how differently I look at something and I come back and think, well, I'm going to do that now in a completely different way. So it really does help to have, you know, a good break from things where you're thinking about your work. You're not being overcrowded with other issues in your life. That time is for you and your research, but it's away from your desk and it's away from the same set of things that you see around you every day. Yeah, I'd say those three things are what have.
I agree. I agree with the idea of the conferences. I remember my first year we were obliged to present in a conference. I was horrified by this idea.
Yep.
I had to work 2 months in advance just to prepare for the 15 minutes, but it enormously helped me to get an idea for myself. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? How will I do it? It is really, really working.
That's absolutely right. And it's so interesting because as you'll remember, when I was the director of the PhD program at Reading, and I would have to tell the first year students, you'll be presenting at the conference in March. And they would say, no, I'm not, no, I haven't got anything to say. So this is in their first year, okay? And I said, but you will find you have so much to say. You'll find that you won't be able to fit it in to 10 minutes. And wasn't that the case, Rana? It's hard then to actually fit it into the time when.
Exactly. And I keep encouraging the new students, keep telling them you have to participate. You will have no idea how much you'll benefit once you've finished it. Yeah, it is really working.
Yeah, it's such a sense of relief and you know, and just sharing it with other people and getting those questions is very stimulating. Yes, I think that's right.
Here's another question. Is it normal that my research topic keeps changing the first, the second year, and these changes sometimes affect even the research design? Is that normal?
Yes, I think it is. I don't think it's abnormal. I think I would say it's quite unusual for the research to end up writing a thesis about your proposal. because you learn so much along the way. I mean, a proposal to start with is really just a way of communicating to your supervisors, your potential supervisors, what it is you want to do, and to demonstrate that you understand enough about the area and you understand what's involved in it. But of course, no one, you know, research is always new ground, it's new territory. And so you're going to come across things that can't always be predicted. And also you might find things that are really important to the area, and that you need to go in that direction. So I really don't think that it is a problem at all. In fact, there must be advantages in it to evolve with the thinking, because if you try and stick too much to something, you might find that you have got problems with it that come out in the end in the viva, and that it's actually better to evolve with the subject as it goes. Clearly, changing it completely. I mean, I have known PhD students who've had to change topic totally after a year, because perhaps they couldn't access the data that they needed to answer those research questions. It was just impossible for whatever reason. So they had to adapt it totally to do something else. But that's really through necessity. But as your thinking develops and as you get your results back from your first study, your thoughts will develop further, and you have to go with those and expand with those, because it makes it a much more well-rounded thesis as well at the end.
Oh, nice, good.
Dr. Rana, can I please, before the third question, I would like to welcome Dr. Ahmed Al-Milibari to welcome Dr. Jacqueline Laws, please. Dr.
Well,
Ahmed
good afternoon,
Al-Milibari.
everyone. Jacqueline, welcome aboard Riyadea. This is becoming a very interesting Friday afternoon treat where I am now. I just came from Friday prayers, and with Rayhan at Reading, you know, this R factor now with COVID-19 is giving a new definition in a positive aspect. You know, Mark was a guest speaker as well, and I've enjoyed and will continue to enjoy all these contributions that show collaboration between academics of high caliber such as yourself and Mark, and very serious PhD students from my beloved country. And, you know, universally speaking, I always bring something personal into my input. With Mark, it was train spotting, and the link with that in Nottingham. With you, Jacqueline, I've just noticed the most recent paper, which I have enjoyed reading, and how much it would help, you know, international students learning English in language acquisition and using phrasal verbs. I've noticed that, you know, amongst the references that you've used together with your group was Norbert Schmidt and Svenja Adolphs. Now, bringing Nottingham into the picture once again, you know, Norbert is a colleague in the School of English Studies.
Yeah.
He is from the United States of America, and he's been living in the UK for a number of years. And I've seen him through the corridors between the School of Cultures, Languages, and Area Studies and the School of English. And I've been a classmate with Svenja Adolphs when he was a staff member. Now, the point I'm driving at is collaboration between academics during the time when we have PhD students who are promisingly professional to provide, some input together with some support from supervisors like yourself. It's funny that, he and Svenja Adolphs worked on research for someone who published in the year Professor Norbert Schmidt was born.
Yes.
So this lifelong journey of, you've mentioned publishing and how much important it is to start as early as you can, but you're never late anyway. Whenever you start, and go ahead with it. And the phrase you've used, I thought of commenting on by saying, well, you can run, but you can't hide from, academia by not publishing, by not contributing to conferences and time management and so on. All these are quite important reminders for all of us. Now, interestingly enough, the CAN Code project was something between Cambridge and Nottingham for this course of spoken English,
Right.
which gave me an enlightening, feedback again. I was thinking, based on research previously that highlighted 2,000 family words would be enough to cover up to 95% of English speaking capability and facilitating communication in English. Being a learner of English, and I will continue to be learning in Arabic and English as well, Schmidt and Edholz, in their first joint paper in 2003, were indicating that no, it had to be 5,000 individual words to cover nearly 96% or so. So it is, again, a long life journey of learning in all aspects possible. Thank you ever so much.
Well, thank you
for the
very much.
opportunity. I just came back from Friday prayers. I didn't even have time to change clothing, and I thought I should go and unplug my national attire as well.
That's perfectly okay. No, well, thank you very much for your comments. I think that's absolutely right. Yes, these are lifelong journeys indeed. The research is something that takes a long time to mature. You can't do it quickly. It takes a long time and a lot of thinking and rethinking to get it right. Yeah, thank you for those comments. That's very nice to meet you.
Ahmed, if I have a minute just to introduce Dr. Ahmed for you, Jackie. Dr. Ahmed is a professor in the Nottingham University, and he is one of our Riyadea team. He is the pillar of Riyadea team. He's like our father. Whenever we need an advice, whenever we need a tip or something, we always go to him, and he always happily answer all of our questions and welcome us to any event, and he would join us even though he is in the middle of something. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. And
that's marvelous. Thank you.
And I would also thank Dr. Mark Hassan. Thank you very much for joining us. That means a lot to us. Just seeing your name in the screens means a lot to us. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Yes, that's true. Thank you, Professor Mark. And I would like to welcome Dr. Masha'al Batrafi. She's a student as well, doctoral researcher at Economic Department, and we share the same supervisor, which is Professor Mark Hassan. Dr. Masha'al Batrafi.
Yeah, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Hello, yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you, Jacqueline, for your time. I really enjoyed your tips. And thank you for Riyadea for arranging this meeting every week. It's really useful for a PhD student, especially in this difficult time. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, yes.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Rihan. We'll talk later.
But thank you, Dr. Masha'al, for supporting Riyadea all the time. You're one of the main member in Riyadea as well events. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. If we go back to the questions, if you don't mind, we have a couple of questions in the chat. Are you okay, Jackie, with going back?
Yeah.
Sure. All right. So we have here where and how the researcher used theory in research.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure that I fully understood the question. Where and how?
And how the researcher used theory in research.
Okay. Well, the research will be couched in some theoretical framework. So one really starts from the theoretical point of view and then develops the subject from there. So essentially the theory is what starts it off, and it is the theory that you then use to devise your research questions. And then in answering those research questions with your data, you then discuss how well those research questions have been addressed at the end. So essentially the theory runs all the way through it, and the data should be there to support or contradict any of the theoretical approaches. I hope that's answered your question.
I hope so. We have also another longer question, so I'll try to read it slowly.
Mm-hmm.
How can we motivate students to participate in a 45-minute study online? The study was supposed to be in a lab, but because of COVID-19, I spent 2 months trying to do so, but I have only 88 and I need more than 100.
Yes. Now, actually, this was very difficult. Again, in my own experience, I needed 24.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't able to, the initial group of people I wanted to invite did not come forward, did not accept an invitation at all. So I actually had to find alternative routes. It is very, very difficult. Depending on your circumstances, I do think that monetary rewards are very useful if you can pay them to do it. This will encourage them more. You know, as Mark Kassim was saying earlier, everybody is incredibly busy at the moment, much busier than they were before. So you don't have the free time now just to do something for the fun of it. If you do want to use other people's time, then I'm afraid actually offering them some reward is really quite useful. I would say, you know, in the UK, something like £10 an hour is the sort of thing that you might need to think about. Right. It does get expensive, but at least you get the data.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know, you have to publish the advertisements in various places. And again, it's not like walking down the corridor where you see posters. You have to be able to perhaps ask people who have distribution lists. So for example, at Reading, it might be an idea to contact the graduate school and ask the administrators there if they could send out an email, an invitation email, to the PhD students in various departments across the university, for example. That might be useful too, because certainly there isn't the visibility of these types of events as there was before. But yes, I agree, it is a problem and we have to try much, much harder, and it does make the whole data collection a lot more tricky. And as I said before, I had to have small groups of between 2 and 5, and it just meant doing the same thing again and again and again. But it is the only way.
Yeah, what makes it even more difficult is that it's time consuming. Like if in my case, I have planned that I will only take like 3 months for the data collection. Now I'm extending it to 5, which is a problem. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. But hopefully you're able to do some coding or analysis of the data, of the earlier data you're collecting, so that you can use some of that time in between.
Yeah, that's one of my questions, but I'll leave it later. I want to read one of the new questions that we have from the participants, if you don't mind.
Okay.
I'm at the end of the first year, but I still actually feel lost and not completely certain about my topic, although I collected some data and I analyzed them. So how can I overcome this feeling in my upgrade meeting?
Right. Well, I would say immediately, if you're anxious or worried about where the research is going, you must speak now to your supervisor. If it's possible to do this before the upgrade, I would really recommend it. The thing, as you know, this tunnel, this image of the tunnel that I used in my presentation,
was a creepy one, yeah.
It's so important. You know, we hide in this tunnel. We have our fears and our worries, and we hide in it, but we mustn't. We must get out there and express our concerns. So what I would recommend to this person is that they actually write a list of all the things that they're worried about. You know, articulate very clearly why, you know, are they worried about the theoretical framework? Are they worried about, are they going to be able to find the data sources? Are they unhappy about the actual topic? Are they perhaps maybe more interested in something else? Because one of the important things about this PhD journey is you must be passionate about the subject all the time, because if you are not, it will just make it really, really hard. So you have to find that love for it. And if perhaps it's not quite an area that you're interested in, at the end of the first year, this is really a good time to address this totally, you know, completely head on and get it sorted with your supervisor. It's, you know, as I said before, you can change topic after a year, and it does happen for very good reasons. So I'd recommend just writing a clear list of all the things that are a concern and discussing them with the supervisor before the upgrade. I wouldn't go through the upgrade because, you know, if it's possible in terms of timing to do that, maybe postpone the upgrade for a little bit. That's also possible. It doesn't have to be on a particular date, but it's much more important that you're happy with the area that you're researching, why you're doing it, where it's going, than just doing it for the sake of doing it and not being happy about it. That's be my advice.
Well, thank you. That's a good advice. I'll try to write in my fear in bullet points and then discuss it with myself. Yeah, that's a good one. I should try it.
Okay.
One more question, Jackie.
Yeah.
There is always this temptation to do some other things rather than concentrating on the thesis, such as conferences, publishing papers, and these things actually consume time as well. So how can we prioritize?
Okay, the main priority is that time plan for your whole PhD journey. I know that in our department, in Applied Linguistics at Reading, you know, when I was the PhD director, and I know it's still the case now, you have to produce at during your, I think it's in the March of your first year, you produce March or May, depending on which program you're on, you produce a plan for basically the whole 3 years. Yeah. And it's done by week for till the end of the second year, and by month until the end of the third year, because it's still quite a long way off. Now, it's really, really important to have that plan, because time just goes. Time just disappears, and there are always things that go wrong, and we know that. And so it's really important to sort of work backwards from the end and say, this is the date I'm going to submit. This is the date when I have, you know, a long time before that, when the final draft has to be ready, etc., etc., etc. So the planning for the rest of the first year and the second year is really, really, really crucial. And because one has to stick with it, one has to stay with that plan, because any slippage is going to be hard to make up. You always think, oh, well, I'll make up time. I'll just work a bit harder. I'll work longer hours. Yes, but probably you're working longer hours because there's been some problem that you've got to deal with. You know, those longer hours are there for absorbing other sorts of things. So I think, yes, it's important to think about the conferences and build those into the plan. It's important to think about updating any previous pieces you've written on the literature review and methodology as you're going along. It's important to keep all of those in mind and set yourself sort of limits, time limits for getting through the process for the different phases.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really helps to reduce the anxiety and you know, helps to get the work done in time.
Right.
Does that help?
Yes, it does. So like in the data collection process now, and we're not, as you know, it's taking way longer than expected. Would you recommend start writing some of the chapters?
Oh, absolutely. The thing is that when you've had a delay like this, where you're having to stretch it out, the time in between must be utilized as much as possible. And the thing is that you've got it in your head. So whatever you've got in your head at the time, you have to use. So even if when you're going out for a walk and you think, oh, I've just realized I made this connection between that and that, go back and sort of note it down. And even if you can't deal with it straight away, use that time as much as possible. So yes, I mean, if during your data collection, Rana, you can do some of your coding as early as possible, get all of that done. See what tasks you had planned for immediately after the data collection, and try and bring those forward as much as possible, so that in the end you're not slipping by 2 months. You know, you're just reducing that slippage to the minimum.
Good.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry. And the thing is, in some ways, by having this extended period, you're freeing up some of your mental space. And by doing that, you can take advantage of it. You're actually being forced to come out of your tunnel a bit. So I would take advantage of that as much as possible.
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, I wouldn't agree that we have this space in our mind.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, I have to be honest.
Fair enough.
All right. One last question?
Yes.
Okay.
I have more questions as well. 2 questions I got from my private. So when you finish,
you can go first, Rehan.
You finish first.
All right. Okay, Jackie, what would you do differently if you could redo your PhD journey?
Oh, well, probably most of the things that I said. I did create a tunnel for myself, and whenever I was forced to come out of it by giving a conference presentation or a seminar in the department, I realized how important it is to get out of your head and communicate what you're doing. It was really motivating. It, apart from anything else, it strikes up, conversations with other people in a different sort of way. And I would definitely have done that. What I didn't do was I didn't publish during the time for my PhD. I wish I had done that. I always thought, oh, I haven't got time for that. I've got to get on with this. And, I regret that. I wish I could have done that. Or I thought, oh, no, well, I'll do it as soon as I finished. And of course, I never did. So I think that's another thing I wish I had done.
Yeah, that's a good push for us to start thinking of publishing.
Yeah, I mean, it really does help a lot to put it into writing. I mean, in Reading, we have the language studies working papers, for example, where you can submit a short article, 5,000 words. It can be about your methodology. It can be about your theoretical approach. It can be about anything, but just putting it down in writing and getting it reviewed. And seeing the comments that come back from the reviewers is incredibly stimulating and really, really useful for what you're doing. So that you don't necessarily have to publish, you know, in a mainstream. If you can publish in a mainstream journal, then that's wonderful. But you know, I'd certainly talk to your supervisor about doing that. Mm-hmm. And even if it's something, you know, less public than that, something like working papers. Working papers are marvelous for that sort of thing because they really give you an opportunity to get that feedback. Like in a conference, you get the feedback. And this is all part of being outside the tunnel, getting the feedback.
Nice, nice, yeah. Rahan?
Yes, there is a question I got from a Saudi student. She's going to start right now her PhD, and she will learn English. So for her, she's frustrated of writing a thesis, 90,000 words, and she never learned English before. So now she will start the language because you're linguistics. So for her, she doesn't know how to even ask the question. So for her, she wants to understand where can she start as a linguistics, because in Arabic, they read in different, we read from different angle. So yeah. For her, even reflecting and translating. For you as a linguistics, what can you advise foreign language? It doesn't matter Arabic or Chinese or Japanese, or how can they start with English if they would know that they will start right now in English and then in 2 years they have to start writing 90,000 words?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think what always happens is when it comes to writing the thesis, yeah, you've got more, it's actually a lot easier to write because you've got something to say. You've got something to say. But of course, it seems like a mountain to climb when you're at the very, very beginning. What I'd say really about the English part of it is the more you read, the more you find that the type of English you need and the terminology that you need just automatically gets absorbed. And you find that, so the academic style, because it's not only the language that you're talking about academic style as well, isn't it? Because, you know, there's one thing to be able to talk English for a conversation, but it's another thing to write a PhD thesis. So I would really say the more you read and reread the same articles again and again to really get the essence of how the vocabulary is being used, because very often it's the same type of language that's being used again and again and again. There's a lot of it, but it's being reused. So you find that the more you read, the more you'll become accustomed to that, and you'll find that automatically you're writing like it too. So I would, and also practicing writing. So it just doesn't come immediately. Just practicing writing as much as possible can really help with the language a lot. But as I say, to start with, it's just reading, and without realizing it, you're getting that type of register, you know, the sort of academic register that's needed in another language. So that would be my main advice, I think. But also not to worry, not to be concerned, because you always have plenty to say. And it's often more difficult to reduce the amount you've got to say than to try and extend it. But the first hurdles are difficult. You are going through quite a difficult transition at the beginning to get into that academic register of writing. So I would just recommend reading, and then summarizing what you find as if it were a proper piece of work, you know, a proper academic assignment as much as possible.
Can she, for example, start writing? She's asking right now in WhatsApp. Yep. So can she start writing her ideas in Arabic and translate it? Then she will get to know more the idea. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's in Arabic or in Chinese or Japanese. I'm just asking about international students.
Certainly. I mean, I think in the very, very beginning, you have to be very safe You have to stay in your comfort zone. So yes, to start with, you write it in your native language and get your ideas sorted, and then translate it into English. Yes, as much as possible. You have to start from that, otherwise it could be you need to sort your ideas out in your native language first of all, until you feel comfortable enough to converse with yourself in your head in English, in the other language.
Dr. Rana, thank you so much. Dr. Rana, we have Dr. Sarah Abdurrahman. She wants to share a question.
Actually, I get one question. Now I am doing a master in law. When I read some article, I understand the single word, but I don't understand the main idea, or every single word I understand. Should I keep going, or I translate it to Arabic? I don't know what I should do.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you understand all the vocabulary,
yes,
but you feel that you're not getting the message.
The meaning, yeah.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I mean, you're doing a master's at the moment.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Are the articles that you're reading also articles that your classmates are reading?
Yeah, the material that we should provide for a single lecture or mini lecture. I read it, but I understand the vocabulary, but the meaning, what the writer mean, I don't get it.
Okay.
I didn't get it.
One thing you could do is have a study group with some of your classmates, and maybe discuss together what you feel the main points were that came out of these important articles. That might be a way to would that be possible, do you think?
Yeah, I have some group, but all the classmates Arabic. They speak Arabic.
Yeah, well, that's good. No, that's fine. That's even better, because that means that you'll all have the same, you know, that's better.
The same idea.
Yeah, the same idea about it. So it might be useful to get just a small group where you just discuss what you think the article is about, why you think it's important. I mean, it might then if I think it's the first stage. The first stage would be to discuss it together, because you might find that other people have seen things that you haven't seen, and then that'll make you think, oh, okay, well, maybe I have to look at that. So again, sharing your thoughts, I think, is a good way to start. The next thing, of course, is to ask the lecturer who takes that particular module, if you could have a class discussion about the articles, and so that it can be discussed in class as well. That might help as well.
Okay. What about should I translate all the file in Arabic and read it in Arabic, and then I read it again in English? That's a good idea or not?
No, not with someone with your level of English. No. I got the feeling from the previous question that the level of English was really quite, beginner. But in your case, you're not a beginner. You have a good command of English. And so what's important is that you understand the article in English and think in English, and not refer back to your L1, your native language at this point. At masters, I really think so. I think the question from the previous person who was trying to get their ideas together, I think to do that when you don't have, you know, if you're really not sure about your language proficiency, it's a good idea to do it in your native language to start with, to explore ideas. But in your case, where you're actually trying to extract information from an article, I think you have to, you mustn't, I think it's much more important to do it in English. And talk around it, because if there are some misunderstandings, they will come out in the discussion.
Thank you so much.
That's all right.
Thank you, Sarah, for your questions. That's very interesting questions. Anyone have questions can raise their hands, please. Live questions. We're happy to answer the questions.
Jackie, I noticed that the time is 12:05.
Yes, that's
So
what we always do.
Longer than expected.
That's all right. I'm fine. Don't worry.
Should we go on? Because I have one question in the chat.
Okay.
It's actually the opposite of what you were discussing a minute ago. I exceeded the word limit for my upgrade report, and I tried to adhere the word limit, but I couldn't because I have a pilot study and I need to explain the data more in details. So how can she manage to reduce?
Okay, so this person is about to do their upgrade.
Yes.
Okay. One thing they could think about is, can any of the information be put into an appendix? Because we often think that, oh, everything's important and I've got to show everything, but maybe there are some aspects of it, maybe some details of the pilot study that can be put into an appendix so that the main part of the document can be read more smoothly, and if they want to or need to, then the examiners can just look in the appendix for more detail. That might be one suggestion. I have to say, though, that it is one of the exercises that we have to really confront in academia is being concise. And there are always good reasons why we want more words, word count, a bigger word count. But really, when you write for journals, when you write for the public, you actually have to have a word limit, and you have to stay within that word limit. Also, like at conferences, you can't go beyond your time. If you go beyond your time, you get cut off before you have an opportunity to give your conclusions. So it's really important to train ourselves to get the information to fit into the time available or the word count available. So in terms of this upgrade, I would perhaps consider, does everything need to be in the main document for someone who's reading it? Remember the point I made about your reader. Think about your reader. What are they going to want to read? Keep it interesting for them, not what you feel is in your head, where everything is equally important. So, think about them reading it. How are they going to be feeling when they're reading it? What will they want to see? And given that the upgrade is going to involve asking you questions and elaboration on certain issues, use the document in the same way so that you can have additional text or data or something in the appendix that reduces the word count in the main document. I hope that's useful.
Dr. Ahmed have something to say.
Hello.
Yes, hi again. I'm laughing because we're talking about the word limit and time limit, and Riyadea is now establishing some kind of a symptomatic issue that we could possibly ask you, Jacqueline, to. We're seeking your advice. We always go beyond the planned time only because of how interesting the speakers, the guest speakers are, and how engaging the audience is. So what's your advice?
Your exercise, well, well, to be honest, when I was invited, I was told it would be about half an hour. And I thought, well, okay, that's sort of like a conference. I hadn't expected that there would be so many questions. And I'm delighted that there are. And clearly this whole exercise is about people coming out of their tunnels and asking questions. So yeah, I don't mind that we've gone on longer at all. It's been delightful. But I think, yes, because people have these questions and they vary so much, it is important to give them the space. So yes, I think perhaps this exercise should be at least an hour long each time.
But if we say 1 hour, people will run. They will not come to participate. They will be scared a bit to come. So is it better to say to the interviewee that it's 30 minutes, or it's better to say that it will be flexible and more, because we might get more questions for their time? Because even in our AIDS exhibitions, we have on our voluntary previous events, in aid, instead of staying 2 hours in global aid, we stayed 5 hours.
Oh.
Yeah,
so today we're not going to stay 5 hours. Don't be worried. We will finish this soon.
That will not happen with the exercise of my supervisor and I.
That will not
tapping
happen
on
with
the generosity of such kind people as Jacqueline and Mark and future guests. I think it's of valuable information that we continue to share. And maybe I just thought of a suggestion of saying to be continued. So we go for part 2, part 3, part 4, and it continues as a journey of learning once again.
Absolutely, yes. Indeed. I mean, you know, I think a session, you know, an hour like this has been fantastic. I think it's enough time for just, you know, the speaker to say enough things.
Yes.
And actually 45 minutes or so for questioning is actually great. So, but yeah, it has to evolve. It has to, but maybe saying that it's flexible is a good idea.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that might be a good idea. Fortunately, I don't have any commitments, but so it's okay. But and I'm delighted.
Thank you. Dr. Jacqueline, I would like to ask you one question. If I would like to ask you about your opinion of our project, My Supervisor and I, as we just started now, and Riyadea as well, entrepreneurial activities since during this Ramadan we started. So how can you see the big picture of our program right now?
Of your program, of what
our program, yes, our team program, Riyadea.
Okay, well, I think it's the big picture is creating a landscape for researchers and to really invite people in as much as possible to share those ideas. I think, you know, it already has this sense of opening up. By definition, you are opening up to all sorts of different universities and people who are starting, people who are nearly finished. You know, it is about the whole PhD journey. So, you know, perhaps by saying it, you know, we've talked about this already, it is a journey. So having a big picture is looking down on an evolving journey. You can see a bit ahead, but not all the way. And having this exercise allows you to open up more and more to see better further ahead. I don't know whether that helps.
Thank you so much. It is helpful. Yes. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jackie. Thank you very much for the enlightening presentation, for the lovely talk. We really enjoyed every minute of it, as Dr. Ahmed just said in this chat. Would you like to say anything before we are closing?
Well, only thank you very much indeed. I'm very impressed by this initiative. I think it's extremely important. And actually, coming back to one of your questions, Rana, I think I regret that I didn't have something like this when I was a PhD student. And I would certainly have wanted to participate and to hear other people's worries, because that's the other thing. You think that you're the only one who's got these worries and concerns. And there aren't really many ways of finding out what your fellow students are thinking. We're all a bit proud and we want to hide our weaknesses, but we must speak out. there and share them. And I think this is a wonderful initiative, and well done to all of you, both of you. It's fantastic.
All of us. We're a lot. We're a lot behind it.
Yes, I understand.
We are a large team. Thank you very much, Jackie. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend. And we hope we can host you one more time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's take a group picture.
Okay.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye. If anyone wants to stay more, we're welcome. You're welcome. We will have 30 minutes more. If you want to stay more, if you have any questions, I would like to thank all the attendees before I stop the recording. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone attended this session from YouTube, Twitter, and Zoom. ريادية ترحب بكم. مع السلامة. Dr. Rana, would you close the session? Did she left, Dr. Rana? Let's close the session.
If she has, we'll say
Yes.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خير أجمعين.
Dr. Ahmed, thank you so much, Dr.
تحية.
And thanks for my supervisor, Professor Mark Casson, as well, for attending today. A huge support I got from my supervisor and others. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Jacqueline. Thank you.